Hey everybody, so I am the biggest Civ 3 fanboy in the world, and I do feel it's the best game of the series, but I also have a bit of a soft spot for Civ 5, partly because it added a lot of needed changes. So let's talk about what Civ 5 did right, and I have to start with the most riveting subject matter of all, which is, of course, the hexes. So this gets overlooked, probably since it seems like a bit of a gimmick. It very much comes off as a too cool for you idiosyncratic solution to a problem that didn't exist, but if you look at the details, the Hex system is strictly superior to the system that came before it. Let's see those hexes. Beautiful. Civ 3 and Civ 4 use squares. If you're on this tile, then moving to any of these 9 tiles consumes an equal amount of movement points. This leads to a situation where it's just as fast to zigzag back and forth as it is to travel in a straight diagonal line. Aside from dabbing on Pythagoras in the most disrespectful way, there's a ton of small ways that this warps the optimal way of playing the game. You can explore more tiles if you do the zigzag. Building a road with the zigzag actually allows you to access more tiles. Like if you count the tiles that you can walk on when leaving both of these roads, the zigzag actually gives you more. It's easier to guard borders or coastlines that run diagonally as opposed to straight north-south or straight east and west. It's a small thing, but the system just doesn't hold up to scrutiny, and that's why I vastly prefer the hexes from Civ 5. Point number 2 is going to be building tall or wide. Now, Civ 4 kind of flirted with this, but in Civ 5 it's built right into the civics choices. Take a look at this. One of the civics trees made it easy to build up a few great core cities, and the other civics tree made it easier to do expansion. Civ 3 didn't have this. The optimal way of playing was, generally, to build and conquer as many cities as fast as possible. You weren't punished for having too many cities, which is fine, but you also weren't rewarded enough for having big cities early on. Wonders kind of get you to focus on production in Civ 3, but the best wonders have global effects. And so you don't usually get those mega cities like you would out of a good Petra city, for example, in Civ 5, which is a shame. There are a few times where I've seen this in Civ 3, and when it happens, it's brilliant. There's a niche strat where you can stack tourism gold and combine it with otherwise underwhelming science wonders. And in the Future Start multiplayer mod, there's also those kind of increasing returns to scale that allow for mega cities early on. Otherwise, the optimal way of playing is growing wide in Civ 3, and I think that's a missed opportunity. So, point number 3 is going to be better AI opponents. Now, I don't feel like playing any Civ 5 today, so let's not have everybody start denouncing me all at once. I'll admit, the AI in Civ 5 really struggled in combat with the 1 unit per tile restriction. But I think that reflects more on the combat system, which I personally dislike, more so than on the AI itself. Numerous small tweaks were made to make the AI feel more realistic and human even going into Civ 5. Things like more distinct personalities, more diplomatic options that aren't just trade, city-states, and sometimes they're just plain smarter, too. Let's look at this example from Civ 4. We park all of these units outside the Dutch border. And what does he do? Absolutely nothing. He's just going to let me walk in here. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, he just let me walk in. Meanwhile, if you try to do the same thing in Civ 5, you're going to be greeted by this message. We get a warning. Now, if you've spent as much time playing the earlier Civ games as I have, this is a scary experience the first time it happens. I feel called out. I feel personally attacked by this, and that's a fantastic thing to feel in a video game. Earlier games in the franchise just don't have many of these moments, and so I think there were a lot of improvements to the AI in Civ 5. So, point number 4 is going to be the resource system from Civ 5. Now, Civ 3 and Civ 4 kind of dropped the ball on resources. They made it an all-or-nothing affair. You have one horse, you can build all the horsemen you want. You don't have it, you can't build any. I could tell you the obvious reasons that this doesn't make sense and it isn't fun, but I think this example from Civ 3 will drive the point home. Think of this, which is the World War II in the Pacific scenario. The importance of resources in the war machine was a key driver in World War II. Japan had oil, they had planes, they had tanks, but they still needed more oil. Civ 3's resource system cannot handle that. they actually had to build another incentive system, the victory point system, from the ground up, just so that players in this scenario will actually fight over these oil tiles in Southeast Asia. Like, think about how ridiculous that is. Imagine if your combat system was so broken that you had to build a second combat system just to fill in the gaps from the first. And even then, it didn't turn out very good. It's just a sign that something's wrong. By contrast, Civ 5's system is much more intuitive when it comes to resources. Got a lot of oil, you can build a lot of tanks. Got only one source of oil, you can have a few tanks as a treat. But you still have an incentive to hook more, and that's the important part. Point number 5 is going to be the link between borders and culture, and taking a step in the direction of getting rid of that. So in Civ 2, the borders were not visually represented on the map, which I find makes the games more confusing and unsatisfying. Borders were an excellent addition to Civ 3, but they had to figure out a mechanic to determine how do borders expand. There are plenty of things that make sense. Military, population, infrastructure, diplomacy even. But no, Civ 3 decided to have borders of your nation determined by culture. Civ 4 even doubled down on this, introducing culture bombs. Yeah, remember that mechanic? Big artistic works that dramatically increase your national borders, which makes total sense. Who could forget the time that Marvin Gaye released Heard It Through the Grapevine, and parts of southern Ontario just magically became part of America. Now, obviously this doesn't make any logical sense, but that's not my big problem with the mechanic here. It's a missed opportunity. It's an abstract, passive way of determining borders, when there's so many other options that allow players to make cool choices. Imagine if, instead of culture, borders were determined by diplomacy. I trade you map making in exchange for these 2 contested tiles, or I demand that you give me these tiles, or else I declare war. Think how cool that would be. With Civ 5's introduction of social policies, this makes culture do something else in the game, which paves the way for disconnecting it from national borders. The step is a bit of a small one, but Civ 5 does change things up. They make it so you can buy tiles to bring them under your control, which is a great addition. Civ 6 kept the system, it seems, but hopefully the franchise will develop more in this direction going forward, and eventually culture won't be linked to national borders at all. So yeah, those are the things I like about Civ 5. Let me know in the comments how you feel about the game, and if there's any Civ 5 related content you'd like to see from me. I'm considering streaming it. There doesn't seem to be many people streaming Civ 5 on YouTube at least. So yeah, see you guys next time.